too. So if you follow McNamara Broker Team or Boston Connect Real Estate, you can find us on there. But we do have two very special guests tonight. One of them, I can't see her right now, but I will be able to see her. So if you are joining us live, you'll be able to see them as well. But we have Amy Masferrer. Hello, Amy.
Hi guys, how are you? Happy to be back. How you doing?
Good. I know I ask you every single time that you're on the show, but I always feel like I pronounce your name wrong. So I always like stumble a little bit.
No worries. Yeah, Amy Masferrer.
Okay.
It's combined and complicated just like me. So.
You are not complicated.
I try not to be.
You're one of my favorite people to catch up with when I haven't seen you in a while, because like your stories just like brighten my day. They might not brighten your day.
I always have a bag full. I can assure you that. Yes.
Well, Amy is joining us from Sherman Law. Amy, I know you've been on the show before, but why don't you reintroduce yourself to all of our listeners as we get set up over here, sort of where you are located, how long you've been in the business, what you do, all that fun stuff.
Sure. So I'm a real estate attorney. I've been at Sherman Law for the past 3 years. I've been a real estate attorney for the past 20 years. So on all sides of the coin, representing the lenders. For the past decade, I've represented buyers and sellers primarily. So I have a kind of a vast background there, and our office is in Derby Street in Hingham. That's our primary location. We also have a secondary location that just opened up that's really fabulous. Jessica Fennessy is the primary attorney sitting out there, and I get to do closings out that way too in Plymouth. So wherever your property is located, we have a good spot for you to meet. So
everyone sort of, when I do open houses or I meet the public or whatever, everyone always asks, oh, where's your office located? Is Boston? When I say Pembroke, I sort of just explain to you, it doesn't really matter like where your office is, like, because we can sell all over Massachusetts. And it's sort of the same thing with you guys, right? I know sometimes you do house calls or you meet in a McDonald's parking lot or something.
Oh, yes, I've been to just about every McDonald's, I have to say. I'm a bit of a traveling roadshow, and if you like give me a town, I can probably find the coffee house that I've been to or the location. Especially during COVID, we got very, very creative when we were meeting people. So always good, but yeah, happy to travel, and it's part of the game for sure.
And I think we mentioned this the last time you were on the show, because I think you were on after you opened your Plymouth location, but Mary and I did go to your grand opening down there, and it was just such a beautiful space. And Sharon was actually with a potential client at the time, and was unable to attend, but we kept saying the whole time we were there, we're like, Sharon would love this. It's like brownstone in the middle of Plymouth. Like,
it's perfect. It's Kristen and Tim Sherman, like really, they design everything with the idea that, we want a really personal experience for our buyers, especially when they're coming in. Everybody's coming in with a U-Haul and stress. They got dogs, they got, family in the car. So to come into a beautiful space, sit down, take a breath, have a cup of coffee, and like do what you're supposed to do, which is make the biggest investment of your life. We like to kind of, set the tone there that it's welcoming. And I see Maria's joining me too. She's one of our CATIC representatives. I rely on her very heavily in what we do. And when we talk about title insurance, she's going to be invaluable. And I'm so grateful that you came today, Maria. I know I'm always springing things on you, so I appreciate it.
That's okay. Nice to be here.
Yes, and I appreciate you being here as well. I am Sharon, so nice to meet you. And to all of our WATD listeners, just to let you know, we're going to be redoing our show from last Tuesday. We had some technical issues, not that we should really talk about that on air, but we did. So we asked Amy if she would come back because this topic is so very important and it is very detailed, and it all worked out actually better too, right? Because we were able to get Maria Courtney here from CATIC Title Insurance Company as well. So Maria, why don't you tell us a little bit about you and CATIC as, is it CATIC Title Insurance or CATIC period?
CATIC title insurance, but generally when you see the logo, it says CATIC on, on the logo. So,
Mhm. Very nice
Um,
logo. I have it up on my computer right now, by the way.
so we're a title insurance company based in New England, but we've actually grown to other states more recently. I've been in the title insurance industry for 22 plus years, working for different title companies. And I work with Amy at Sherman's office and really enjoy working with her and their whole staff. So
That's wonderful. So Amy, is Maria the person that you go to if a problem arises, or is she the person that you go to when you have a new sale, a buyer client that's going to purchase title insurance?
So typically a little bit of both. So she's my primary contact for setting up someone new for insurance. But if a title issue arises, we need to locate their policy. I might reach out to her as well. They also have title attorneys on staff that we run through, particularly for representing a seller. I might see something pop up on title and I want to look and say, is this an issue? Is this something I need to address? How do we get ahead of that? Which is one of the things I really like to do if I have a new seller coming into, representation. I like to take a glance at their title, see what I can see with my own eyes, and get ahead of anything. And CATIC is exceptional at kind of guiding us through that process. So they have a whole team of people, and Maria is a great support for us.
That's awesome. And now I have her contact information. So watch out, Maria.
yeah, we do. We have an underwriting department, so that's where the legal questions generally go. So that they can, they know all the case law and everything. So it's just a lot of things they can just right off the top of their head, help them work through a problem. If there is a problem, our goal is to be able to let you close the loan. But there's certain things that we have to look at and analyze as well.
So when you're doing the title insurance, you're doing it for both for the bank owners and owner's policy. So both.
Correct. Yes.
Oh,
yes.
as a closing attorney, generally, yes, they anytime that someone takes out a mortgage, the lender is generally going to require a title insurance policy, which only insures the lender. And that only insures the lender if the lender goes to foreclosure. They can't file a claim just as the lender. The owner's policy covers the owner's interest, where the lender's policy covers the lender's interest. That they want to make sure that their investment in the property, the mortgage that they gave to the borrowers is covered if something came up on the title. And you could have a title claim that says, something small like an undischarged mortgage that you just need to get a discharge for it, or you can have something that is like a total loss of property. Which the insurance on the owner's policy would be generally the purchase price. So, and Amy usually has a conversation with the borrowers to explain to them the differences between the two. And, we as the title insurance company and also the attorneys always recommend purchasing the owner's policy because it is a one-time purchase, and it is something. It's probably the biggest investment that you'll make in your life is to buy real estate. So
100%. And I mean, we talked a little briefly last week about it, and Mary is currently in the process of having to go through her title insurance. I had to in the past on my primary residence. But Amy, one thing that's really interesting that Maria just said is that so I've heard you say for over, all these years that we've known each other, the title insurance that you automatically sort of see is the protection of the bank, right? So that's the mortgage company or the bank or whoever. And then you should always buy your own. I didn't realize. So if there was a title issue with, let's just say, give me something, an easement issue.
So like an easement issue. So the bank is only invested and covered if it financially impacts them. And they really only become financially impacted if their ownership is at risk, like in a foreclosure, where they might not be able to recoup their expenses. If there's, a small parcel of land, like I know we talked a little bit, if some of the viewers heard last week about Mary's situation, if there's a parcel of land in dispute of who owns it, whether it's a part of, a neighboring lot or your lot, if it doesn't impact the value, the lender isn't going to get involved. That's an owner issue that goes to your scope of ownership. So, again, you're insuring your interest in the property, which includes, much more than just the financial impact, so that's the primary difference. And, a lot of people, especially our first time home buyers, they're really pulling together what funds they have to get into homes sometimes. And they look at the closing disclosure, which we all get, and they see those words optional next to the insurance. And, more often than not, maybe if there's a mom and dad involved, they say, you don't need that. That's just upselling. That's like car insurance. It's a very, very different thing. And we have to really be very clear with people that the lender's insurance does not cover them. And the owner's insurance, you actually get a discount, and CATIC offers a discount even further if you're a first-time home buyer or if you're a first responder. They're very generous. That allows coverage for you if an issue comes up. I can tell you just today, I had a colleague who was looking through a deed for a future sale, and by a Scribner's error, someone had included a life estate on a deed. And we're looking at it, we're like, who is this? How did this get on record? How to, and that's the type of instant scramble, because if you don't have title insurance, you're reading that name and you're going, I hope this person's still alive. I hope I can find him. I hope I can, convince him to sign this without compensating him in some way, versus, we look and we're like, oh, they have owner's title insurance. Okay, this can be taken care of. We know that our sale is going to go forward. There's not going to be a hindrance here, because we're going to be able to rely on the insurance to clear that. And any buyer of that property is going to rest assured that they can have their insured without an exception. So, I know this sounds a little bit complicated, but our goal as attorneys is to convey 100% clear title without exception, which means that the insurance company is willing to insure your title ownership up until the point that you take title. Some small items after you take title, but for the majority, you're insuring your title line in front of you, behind you. And so I get a question a lot, two things: why do I have to pay for it, which we talked about, but also, if you did your job Miss Attorney, why do I need insurance? And the reality is, a lot of these errors that come up aren't necessarily something that we're going to be able to see. They might be probate records that were misindexed. They might be, if a property is registered and recorded land, only, nothing showed up on the registered side when we checked. There's a numerous human error that can happen, because the registry of deeds, as much as we, think, is, imagine the DMV of homes is basically, so you can see how things can get
with COVID
lost
and everything.
Right. And Maria, we were talking about this. This was a huge point of her. Recordings, everything are behind, things like probate records are behind because of COVID. We had limited courthouse time. We have limited staff. So there might be things that might not have popped up yet, and you're really relying on that. So, insurance, a lot of people think, oh my God, it costs so much. Monthly premium. We think about health insurance. In general, you're looking at, on an average, $500,000 house, maybe $1,250, $1,000 if there's discounts. One payment that gets rolled into your closing, right. And that's peace of mind.
Can I ask a question while you're on that right there? So I wrote down on my notes, could that be a seller concession? Could you ask for a seller concession for that?
I think
part of your offer.
Well, we kind of you could if so you can know, it's interesting. I think everything's negotiable, but when the seller is you would basically use that as a closing cost credit. Yes. Is what you'd be offering. Yeah. So, I think that, yes, but it basically falls into the general pad of closing cost credit, prepaid items. It would be accredited accordingly.
Well, a good idea, don't you think, Amy? I mean, I've been doing this for 21 years and I never thought about that until right this very moment. Right.
I mean, particularly if you're dealing with an estate and people are nervous about the transaction, to be able to say, I'll cover your cost of an owner's title insurance policy to give you more comfort in the transaction. Mm-hmm. Estates are one of the primary reasons why we see delays in closing sometimes, because people just aren't aware of how they're holding their property or how their family held their property until they pass away. and then you're trying to kind of recollect and pull together records.
Mhm.
So I think that could be, a potential.
Yeah, especially now, right? We're trying to think outside the box a little bit for our sellers. Maybe we could say something like, hey, why don't you offer a seller concession, towards closing costs?
Right.
And then put that, any little extra that you could do to give the buyer comfort, especially now that the rates have gone up and different things have happened. I think that that's a great idea.
Yes,
Right.
yeah. And I think we're going to see more creativity on the seller side too, as things kind of switch, where we saw, buyers before were paying for the seller's move. You can live,
Yeah.
you can live with it. I have one closing now where, the use and occupancy was for the in-law apartment below. So the buyer and seller literally became roommates. It gets very creative out there for sure. And God bless the realtors who, got all these people. I mean, you guys should be in charge of the peace talks for sure to get all
Oh,
these people
goodness.
to agree.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it is, as markets are changing and things are sort of shifting a little bit, you really do have to sort of think outside the box. And I just think that just sort of came to me when you were just talking about it. And I'll tell you, I've always been a huge advocate. Every time I'm, previously when I used to go to all the closings and the topic would come up and I would always say, my opinion is you should do it. You never know when you're going to need it until you do.
Right.
Right.
For a one-time fee to be considering this, and even if you're, I've been in my house for 30 years, which I can't believe my 30-year anniversary is a week from Monday, right? Been in the same house. We had to use ours before, but even for people, I would say it would be more risky for short-term people if something happened.
Right.
If you think about
Yeah.
50 years ago, when they were doing recordings, we were still using DOS. Did all of that, the person who was inputting all that data, you mean to tell me that there was no typos or anything
Right.
that,
Yeah. Absolutely.
Right.
I mean,
yeah.
And sometimes title
I'm a
issues
title
go-
insurance attorney and I still have title insurance on my house,
Yeah.
because I know that when I want to go to sell my house, if anything comes up, time is the most precious commodity in a real estate transaction. You can't get that back. I could lose a buyer who might be willing to pay more money because they want to close quickly. And suddenly I have a title issue that pushes my closing out 60 days. I've now lost that prime buyer because they have to move quickly. So, that is really key. And Maria, I'm sorry, I think I cut you off there.
No, I was just going to say that even the cost of title insurance, sometimes, one claim would be well beyond what it would cost to get it. And as Amy mentioned, when you do purchase it at the same time as the lender's policy, you would get a simultaneous discount. So it is cheaper to buy it together. One thing to keep in mind too, when you buy an owner's policy, it stays with you for the entire time that you own the property until it's deeded out. And in some circumstances, if it goes to an estate, it will carry forward to the estate. But
What if I put it in a trust? If I purchase my home as Sharon and Mark McNamara, and then I put it into a trust. So the Sharon and Mark trust, did it die with us? And then we have to buy it again?
No, if you're like the principal of the trust, then
Yeah.
it would carry forward.
Okay. So
Right.
it still
And
would.
then the other thing too, CATIC does offer first-time home buyer discounts for people when they purchase an owner's policy. And also we have what we call a gratitude program. So it's for first responders, veterans,
Oh,
and
nice.
military. So
Oh, that's really nice to be able to do that.
They're the only company I know who does that, which I appreciate. I work with a lot of police officers and firemen, and it's really nice to be able to say, there's an added bonus to this.
yes.
And, in terms of, it being a one-time premium, that is a question that comes up a lot because we hear a lot of our buyers right now are saying, okay, I'm buying, but I'm probably going to refinance later down the road when the rates come down. So, passing on that knowledge that no, you don't have to buy this again. This stays with you through a refinance is key.
And that was what I kind of got sidetracked, but the owner's policy stays with you. But if you take out another mortgage or you refinance, each time that you do a mortgage, they would require a lender's policy. So,
Right.
whenever you refinance, you do have to purchase the mortgage policy again, because that loan policy is insuring the mortgage. So if you're refinancing, the other mortgage is going to get paid off and discharged, and the new mortgage wants to make sure that they're in first place.
Which
So-
is a very good, and I know Melissa is chomping at the bit.
I
know, because you know why I keep on talking about it? I'm learning some new stuff tonight too, and I'm so excited. But that's really important though, because Maria, as you're saying, I did not know that either. But Amy, what are we hearing right now? We're hearing that whole term is marry the house and date the rate.
Date the rate, marry the house. Yeah.
That's something that people should know, that is going
What
to
is it? Date the what?
Date the rate, marry the house.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So even if the rates will,
And in my case, divorce and keep the house.
That's why I love your stories.
Just a side note. Just a side note.
but I mean, that's, there's so many agents out there that are saying, and loan officers, oh, you know what? Yeah, your rate might be 6%, but you can always refinance when they drop again. Okay. Yeah, you can do that. But there's also going to be fees that are included in that. And that would be
Right.
the mortgage and title insurance, correct?
Right.
Perfect.
Is it, when you refinance, there is a refinance discount for people.
Oh, there is.
Yes, but it's and that's generally across the board. They used to look at, if you're refinancing within 7 to 10 years, that's when you would get the discount. But it's across the board now. The lenders quote it with refinances. They usually do quote it at a refinance discount.
Yeah, for the lender's policy. Yeah.
I just want to let all of our WATD listeners know, and all of our listeners on Facebook. I know that we are all over social media right now. Melissa has shared our group with everybody, so you can see us live here on Facebook. To all our WATD listeners, we have George, who is in studio in Marshfield. We are in our home studio here at Boston Connect Real Estate, who is one of the sponsors, along with McNamara Broker Team, which is me and Melissa. I had Mary here with me last week. And if you have any questions regarding title insurance or anything to do with law, tonight is really your night to call in 781-837-4900. Again, 781-837-4900. Go ahead, Mel.
I was just wondering if you could give some examples of what title insurance wouldn't cover. Any scenarios that you have?
What it wouldn't cover. So
Yeah.
when a title insurance policy is issued, if there's something that shows up on the title, like an easement, that would be included as an exclusion to title. And I do think that we have some listed here, just.
What about real estate taxes? What if you didn't pay your real estate taxes?
It wouldn't cover something that you created yourself. So,
Okay.
but it does cover real estate taxes from before the time of the policy. So,
Right. So if a prior owner had real estate taxes that popped up and a lien was put on after the fact of conveyance, it would cover that.
yes, but if
Yeah.
you don't pay your real estate taxes, it does not cover that. It
Right.
won't cover something that you've created,
Mhm.
yourself.
Does that cover I'm just thinking like mold in your house, like just stuff like that, like
No.
any remediation or anything? No, I'm saying it wouldn't
It could happen before. No. So conditions of the property, no. It's just the title. And one of the things we talk about is title versus deed. When you get the deed to your property, that's your proof of ownership. Your title is the chain of ownership that leads to that deed. What we're ensuring is that chain of title. So nothing to the condition of the property. It's all about, the ownership, the transfer of ownership rights. One of the things that does pop up though is mechanics liens. So one thing is, often people, bill collectors and things like this, they kind of wait. And then all of a sudden they see a for sale sign on a house that they've worked on, and they are like, okay, well, I never got paid on that. I'm going to start the process of putting a mechanics lien on. A mechanics lien is for unpaid work from, a laborer who has done work on a property. They can file a lien against the property, and it follows the property with very little, there's a wait period, but very little notification to any other party. So it just sort of pops up on title. So that's one of the things we're doing. And we have to look so carefully at the title. You have to remember, when we get a buyer representation, we order what's called a title review. So a professional title examiner combs through the records and looks through the history of the title through 3 ownerships, no matter how far that ownership goes back. So 3 transfers of title. And, they're making sure that there's no, grievances or anything we need to address. We then do another rundown right before we put your deed on record, because we have had situations where we're about to record the deed and there's a mechanics lien that pops up, or there's a tax lien that pops up, because basically the sale of the property has put the neighborhood on notice that, this asset is about to move. So in those cases, we have to immediately, move to resolve those issues very quickly, often going to the seller and basically saying, you got to pay this right now. You got to take care of this before we can go and issue clear title. And mechanics liens, I believe, are covered under the expanded policies, right?
Correct.
Maria? Yes. Yeah. So there's two different types of policies, standard and expanded. Sure, it's a very nominal difference in pricing to get the expanded coverage, and it does cover things like mechanics liens, some lot line disputes, I believe it covers as well.
Underlines, yep.
Yeah, so we always at Sherman Law recommend that you do that as well, because those are really, common things. I think it happened with Mary, just happened with one of my clients. My client goes to tie into town sewer, starts digging on the corner. They start digging on the corner of the property, and the neighbor comes flying out and says, what are you doing on my lands? And there we begin. Everybody gets their owner's policies out. Everyone gets their plot plans and starts, we need a survey. Who's going to pay for the instrument survey? Those things are all, that money, that $1,000 goes really quick. On average, you're looking at $250 an hour for an attorney, if it's a good one.
Yeah.
And cost of surveys, cost of, people coming out to the property. It goes very quickly, and that would all be covered.
Maria, let me ask you this. So you had, when we had first started and you were telling us about the company CATIC, title insurance, you said that there are attorneys that you have on staff that are title attorneys.
Yes.
What is their process? I mean, when Amy comes to you and says, I have a buyer client and they're, so you have the mortgage insurance, right? The lender insurance, then they're going to try to sell the buyer policy, right? The owner policy.
Owner's policy, yeah.
So are you looking at Amy as if, okay, I know that she did a thorough job, or is there another layer at your company that's sort of checking this title and this deed?
So when we sign up so if you think about like your homeowner's insurance or your car insurance, you have car insurance through Commerce, but your agent is Smith Agency or something like that. So we would be like the Commerce, where the title company, and Sherman Law is the agent. So we vet them before we let them become agents. We do vettings, and we want to make sure that we have experienced people, knowledgeable people, people with we do credit checks and all that stuff. So that we vet them. So on a every day, they are looking at the titles. They come to us when there's a title issue, and that's when the attorneys on our staff are going to look at things and analyze it based on case law, based on, past experiences, based on risk. There's all kinds of different variables that go into their decisions. But on a day-to-day, we may not hear from Amy about any title unless there's a problem with it.
And I have a second part to this, because Melissa and I did a show last week. Remember, we had the caller, the guy that called us, he was selling his house.
Yeah.
And so he was looking at houses up in New Hampshire. And I guess, Amy, you'd have to, I would say from you, now the chain is you believing everything that the listing agents are telling you as well, right? So this one agent, this guy called us. He called us on a Saturday, just last week.
Yeah,
right?
I 2 weeks in a row.
2 weeks in a row he called, and we were talking about open houses, that they needed any more, blah, blah. But he said that he went to an open house up in New Hampshire, and he said to the listing agent, he goes, I was very surprised that every time I asked her a question, she didn't seem to know. He goes, I just happen to be a very thorough person. In my head, I thought he's either an attorney or an engineer, but I didn't ask. But before he even goes to an open house, he'll go to town hall and he's doing research. Okay. So obviously someone who's retired and has a whole lot of time on his hands.
Right.
So he went to this one open house and he was out there. He had sort of a plot plan from town hall. And again, you can't tell without the instrument survey, I know, like where the exact lines are, but it was so far off that he could tell that the mailbox and what part of the driveway were on town land.
Mhm.
So he went to the agent and he said, hey, I was just recognizing that it looks like, the driveway and the mailbox are all on town land. And she said, no, that it can't be right. Like they've lived here for years. It's always been that way. And he's like, no, let me show you. So he pulled out the plot plan, showed her. And she said, well, here's the thing. You can just always take it by eminent domain.
No.
That was the agent's response.
Yeah.
As one of those brokers, I honestly,
Yeah.
I cross my T's, I dot my I's. I almost fainted when he said that.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about what real estate agents are saying and what they're putting out there, because potentially, Amy, you're never going to hear that story.
Right. And in the reality is, I get more calls about adverse possession. People think that they've claimed like certain parts of their neighbor's land. And the reality is it has to be adverse. So that means that you had to know it wasn't yours and you were using it, which this person did not. And the town also has to know that you're, that they weren't using the property as well. So there has to be some level of knowledge that basically they knew that you were using the property and they were doing nothing about it. And none of that has happened in that circumstances, right? It's just,
she didn't even use the word adverse possession.
yes, yeah, eminent domain is something, is
Eminent domain means when
eminent domain is so the town can take for
your land.
So I have to say, that is a very tricky thing, because I think as real estate agents, you guys get asked all the time, or neighbors come in with these crazy drawings and things like that, and you're put in this position, and that's when you want to, get an attorney involved right away. I will say, going back to your kind of review question and how I work with Maria. So first a title examination is done by a professional title examiner. Then that report comes to me. I'm reviewing that as well, and I'm looking to see what the notations the examiner made. And if there's an issue that I see but can cure on my own, I take care of that. If there's something more complicated than that, or something that I'm like, I don't think he got this right or she got this right, I send it to CATIC, and that team the same day looks at it and gets back to me. So it's not, you're filing these insurance claims where, you're going to hear in 2 months whether it's literally like an active conversation. And I can't tell you how, as an attorney, how much I rely on their resources, because they just see so much. I mean, the stories they must have, I can only imagine.
Well, I want to hear some of them at the end.
A big one too that we were seeing a lot of before, we still see it, but there's a couple of cases on the foreclosure end that affect title. And some of the circumstances, it was case law that changed that basically made the deed invalid, or the foreclosure invalid. So, in that case, the people that purchased the property from the foreclosure, or there was a foreclosure, somewhere in the chain of title that was done incorrectly, then they if they didn't have title insurance, they would have had to either give up the property or defend, their ownership. Or find the people that were foreclosed on, which is what we did a lot of, was it was the Ibanez case was the name of it. We had to find the people that were foreclosed on, and in most cases would offer them a sum of money for them to sign the deed over to the current owners. And if you did not have an owner's policy, it wasn't anything that the attorney did wrong. It wasn't anything that the title examiner did wrong. It was just case law that changed. That was not grandfathered in for the previous. So that was a big one.
Foreclosure put a halt on real estate, the backlog and the looking at foreclosures. My background is I used to work on the lender side, which was primarily, debt mediation and foreclosure. So I had, a lot of background in that. And when the Ibanez case came down, all of our foreclosures came to a grinding halt as each of those were examined. I'll tell you, back in the day when I was working there in the 2000s in that area, it was very common to foreclose. A mortgage is sold over and over and over again, particularly a mortgage that's struggling will be sold. And each of those assignments have to be recorded in the registry of deeds. and the foreclosing entity, the bank, has to be named as that foreclosing entity. Lots of times the foreclosure would begin, and then we would file the chain of title to kind of clean up the title where we would see that these things had happened. And when I mean clean up the chain of title, it was literally like white it out, type it in, this is it. Very standard. This was the normal practice. This was completely legal. Well, the courts basically came forward and said, you had no standing. You basically, you have a plaintiff and defendant. You don't own this mortgage. You can't foreclose on this mortgage. You can't prove to me that you own this mortgage. So that's when that scrutiny came into play. So if I see a house that has even a history of a foreclosure in it, I'm really going to insist that you get insurance on it, to ensure that review. And it's a lengthy, it's a process. Anytime I see an insurance, a foreclosure in the history of title, I go back to the foreclosing attorney. I'm making sure all the debts were notified. I'm making sure there was no bankruptcy. And these are connections that I have among the industry that I can make phone calls and say, Corday and Associates, I see you're foreclosed on this property. Can you pull this file, make sure, show me what you have? Harmon's office, can you make sure that this is correct? Can you send me the green cards? Literally, it's an old-fashioned practice of the return receipt of the postal receipt is sent back to the attorney. So these are all crucial steps. So again, I think as we go through the cycle of the economy and the economy is good, we're going to see more and more of a norm, which is there's a percentage of properties that get foreclosed upon and put back on the market. And that's something to be aware of, especially with our investor clients. We often have to look at that. You can get title insurance on a foreclosed upon property, but it has a higher level of scrutiny. And one of the key things that they will ask is the former seller in possession of the property? Meaning, are they still on the property? If you're buying a property straight off the auction block and you don't know if the seller is in there, you're going to have to face a higher level of scrutiny, and you might not be able to get owner's insurance. So that's something you should be aware of. You got to talk to the right person.
And Amy, I know one of the things that is very commonplace too is when there's two thoughts that I had is during that time in 20, what was it, 8, 9, and 10,
Yeah.
when mortgage companies were going out of business and then they were just, things weren't getting recorded. Or if you finish paying off your loan or your mortgage, whatever you're calling it, and then you get, your final, what do you get in the mail? Like your deed? I don't know. What do you get?
Yeah. So you get the
Yeah.
discharge gets sent to you. A lot of people don't know that has to be recorded.
Can you explain that in slower terms, just so listeners understand that?
Yeah. So once you've satisfied a mortgage, there's a discharge of a mortgage, which basically it says this debt has been satisfied in full. So as I'm going through your title, your mortgage will appear, but then there'll be a link that says discharge. It'll show me the book and the page. When you pay off your mortgage, you're supposed to obtain a discharge from the bank. A lot of times those are sent to the property, and the people see it, or maybe they don't, and they think, okay, great, I have a receipt, but I don't think that I need to actively record that myself.
Mhm.
Until you record that remains on your title for, I think what is it, 20, so it's 6 years past the expiration of the mortgage, I think I'm thinking off the top of my head. I'd have to check my chart. But if you had a 30-year mortgage and you paid it off, 20 years in, and you didn't record a discharge, and you sold it on year 25 and you couldn't find the discharge, now we're gonna have to track that discharge, because I can't say that the mortgage has expired on its face, right? It's still an active mortgage on paper. So at that point, one of the services that CATIC offers, especially in these banks that maybe have been sold and bought out by larger banks and trailed, they offer a CATIC tracking, which they know. I always say they know where the bodies are buried, but they know where all those little banks went and how to clean that chain of title. That's something, isn't something that I'm going to know from law school, is who bought who and where they are now and who's the president. That is when I'm turning to them, and for a very nominal fee. I think it's like $250 often for the CATIC track. They're going to find that discharge for you. So on some occasions I have people who, some people are great record keepers and they can pull that piece of paper out and give it to me and I can record it. But if they're like me, that's not very likely.
Well, with all the mergers of the banks and, some
Yes.
went out of business. So it's just, And then you have MERS in the mix too. So
Yep.
CATIC is a great resource if you ever, have a circumstance where there's a missing discharge, especially too with equity lines. We see
I was going to just say that. Yeah.
a lot of
Yes,
claims
yeah.
with that because people don't relate an equity line to a mortgage on their house.
Mhm.
So if that gets missed, even if the attorney pays it off, we recommend that they also, pay it off and say that they want to close it. They have the borrower or the seller sign a document saying, please pay off and close this, and then issue a discharge.
Yep.
Mhm.
But we've seen claims where, a equity line wasn't closed, the discharge didn't come in, or it's a lot of the banks send the discharges now more directly to the registry, but there could be mistakes on the discharges, which makes them ineffective.
Couldn't there be small mistakes? Sorry to interrupt you, but I remember one time having a property and it ended up being this huge deal because they used to spell Center Street, CENTRE.
Oh,
Yep.
Everything had changed at some point along the way to CENTER. So I know
Address affidavits and yep.
things like that. I know we only have 5 minutes left, if you can believe that. So I know at the end we definitely
exciting topic.
It's such a great topic. But if you want to call in 781-837-4900, we have a couple minutes left. But how about give us a horror story. Tell us something that like you would never expect happened that did.
Oh, gee, I mean, the life estate today was pretty fantastic. I have to say, reading the my colleague came in, I'm like, yep, that says that. Yep, okay, and you're praying you don't need a Ouija board to find, this person. That is always scary. I've had forgery cases. Yep. So I've had where, especially in the early 2000s, where husbands would frequently sign for wives and take out additional mortgages, things like that. That owner's insurance goes to both parties. So I've had disputes over that. I see a lot of title issues that kind of come out of death, divorce, the big D's.
Mhm.
That can stir up a lot. But I had one funny one where it wasn't really that funny, but 5 brothers, all Johns, so first name John and father John as well. So they named all the boys after John. So, and it was like John Carlos, John Dominic, and one of the Johns didn't sign the deed. So, trying to track down these various Johns across, when Father John had passed and a few of them had passed as well. So you were just I was really hoping that John Dominic was still alive, and he was. So I hope he still is as well, if he's watching. Yay. But I mean, it was one of those moments where you're just like, this is made for reality television. And I spent a lot of time on the web, like, you have to track people down, you have to locate them. You're dealing with older people. Sometimes they don't have cell phones. They don't have any, I'm mailing them letters, hoping that they're going to open them. It can get very tricky versus if you have that owner's insurance policy, I can say, we're okay.
Okay. I mean, what a great feeling just to be able to say, don't worry about it. And I know, Amy, there have been many times, and the first question you will always ask, did you have owner's policy? Did you have?
Always. And sometimes I'm holding my breath when they say it. And they often will say to me, no, can I get it now?
Yeah.
Like,
No.
it's
No.
done. Yeah, the ship has sailed. So
All right. We only have 1 minute left, and I definitely want to give you time to, and Maria, do you have one quick one that you could share with us, like some horror story?
Well, the equity line one really was one. It was the people that had the equity line started using the equity line to pay their son's college tuition, and had no idea that it was tied to a mortgage. And the people that own the property had an owner's policy, and they went to sell, and this mortgage was discovered because the people were paying, it was an equity line, they were paying it, but they never associated it to the fact that it was a mortgage. Because a lot of times with equity lines, you just go into the bank and you sign documents and you don't think about it. So that was one that was, pretty interesting that
Yeah.
they were paying their son's college tuition. In that case,
Right.
people were cooperative, but the title insurance company did get involved and.
Yeah, and I heard of other people, not to cut you off, but we literally have less than 60 seconds left.
Yeah.
Recently, I did hear of somebody, it was a client, they had a HELOC, right? A home equity loan, right? Isn't that what that is? And when banks changed and everything, they stopped getting the bill in the mail, so they stopped paying it. And then it finally caught up to them. But we only have 30 seconds left. Amy, can you give everybody your contact information so they can get in touch with you? And thank you so much for coming back again tonight. We
Of course. No, it was great. Yes. So I am, my number is 617-504-9151. I'll say it again, 617-504-9151. And my initials ahm@timshermanlaw.com.
Perfect. Thank you.
Happy to answer questions too, if people have any email questions too.
Perfect. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Maria. We appreciate you.
Welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Maria, especially for helping out. I appreciate it.
Thanks,
All
Take
right.
Maria.
care, guys. Good to
Take
see you.
care.
Bye.
WATD
Bye.
FM Marshfield, WBMS Brockton.
Thank you, Maria.
South Shore's
Bye-bye.
first choice
Thank
for
you.
live team coverage of breaking news, emergency traffic, and severe weather. WATD. Streaming online at 959watd.com and in your smart speaker just by saying play.